Hello, everyone, and welcome once again back to the Cardboard Box Item. We're doing something a little different this time around. It's a sub-series in which we look at the best games of all time as ranked by Metacritic, which shouldn't take too long. We're going to start at the top and work our way down, and we're basically going to look at each game individually, talk about them a little bit, see do they deserve their place, how well have they aged, and how did we enjoy them when they came out? I'm joined, as always, by my good friends Michael and Sean, and today we are looking at item number 1, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. So, a little bit of background in this game before we really jump into it. Ocarina of Time came out on the N64 in 1998. It's an action-adventure game released by Nintendo, as anyone listening to this probably knows. Big names attached. Shigeru Miyamoto was the producer, and Eiji Aonuma, who is currently the head of the Legend of Zelda franchise. I think this was his first role as head director. So yeah, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. So before we say anything else, I just want to state that I am a big fan of this game. I wouldn't consider myself number one. If you don't say this is the best game of all time, you're a Philistine. But I consider myself a fan. But you guys, how did you come into this game? Have you played it before? Did you play it on release? Have you beaten it? Where are you guys with this game?
So I've never. Well, okay, I played it once. So just for context, I think me and Sean are definitely less well versed in the game in terms of actually playing it as Steve. Steve's probably played the balls off it, but me and Sean have a lot less experience because we play games with guns that are made for adults. Okay,
not these real men games
with fairies and girls in them and stuff like that.
But the fairies have guns.
Yes,
if you had played this, you'd know this.
Well, that's not too far from the truth, but no. But yeah, it's always been. Since I can remember, since I grew sentience, it's always been the best game of all time. It's almost carried around that slogan.
It's always felt that way, hasn't it? Since it came out, it's always been the best game of all time.
And it's funny, it became a meme a while ago, but do you know in the whole debate about video games as an art form and we get compared to movies and stuff like that, and everyone's talking about, what's the Citizen Kane of games? But it's it's always been Ocarina of Time.
I've never seen Citizen Kane.
Because it's... well,
what an outrage!
I know, I need to watch that, yeah.
The reason it is the Citizen Kane of games is A, it always arbitrarily gets voted to the top of the all-time list, it is on this Metacritic list. And B, it's very innovative.
Yeah.
It took a genre that existed. So Legend of Zelda took the action-adventure... Citizen Kane took to biopic, I guess, and added a load of technical innovations that were hugely influential. But maybe it's probably been surpassed, but it's legacy that means that it's
still the first of its kind.
So Michael's a fan anyway. We've established that.
It's a complicated thing. I don't know. It's sort of what was your feelings on the game from the outside, having not played it but being aware of it, Sean?
Yeah, well, I guess I don't really have any I haven't had any time with this game. For me, I've never been a huge Zelda fan anyway, but I've also always known about Zelda, and it's always been held up on a pedestal almost, the Zelda games. And I guess a lot of that stems probably from Ocarina of Time. I had no idea it was the first game on Metacritic until I looked up the list, and that blew me away.
Oh.
Yeah, that
or we should say the top of all time in terms of rating on Metacritic.
That blew me away when I saw it. I was like, really? Bloody hell. And so then when I started looking into the game, mainly for the research on this podcast, I was like, oh, well, okay, well, it does seem, it was the first 3D Zelda, and it seemed, like you said, it did innovate in the genre. It brought in a lot of things, it introduced a target lock system and context sensitive buttons and stuff for actions on screen, all things which are now staples of many genres of video games, really.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you read the Wikipedia before starting this.
No problem. That was the majority of my research for this. But
have you guys? So, Michael, you said you played it a bit. Sean, have you played it before, at all? Even for
no, never.
No,
never.
Okay. No, that'll be interesting actually now, because most people I know would have played this like
Sorry, you
no,
Take back
no.
our gamer cards.
If you would send them in. No, but to be fair, now it's just the circles that I mix in. You know, nerds.
Not us jocks, me and Sean.
Michael, how much did you play it? Like, what? Like, did you just jump in for like 5 minutes, or did you start it for a bit, or how did that go?
I think I played a little bit at the beginning, and maybe I think some other dungeon somewhere I like picked it up for a minute, and this is a while. This is probably like 10 years ago, so maybe 10 years after it came out as well. So it was already pretty like antiquated by the time I played it.
Yeah.
But it does show its age a little bit, and there's certain like the main thing I take away from Ocarina of Time is that it innovated in so many amazing ways and it codified so many things for that genre, for 3D games in general, like the targeting system, etc. But some things it did in such a slow and like awkward way, and like the beginning I think was really bad. I just think it starts so slowly, and it just like has so many interruptions. Like Navi is. It's a meme at this point, but Navi interrupts you so many fucking times. And it's sort
She's
of like...
still not the worst one, though. Like, the one from Skyward Sword, if you ever played that, was like actually worse than Navi. But sorry, that's just...
But how did they...
She's not the worst one.
People talk shit about that back then, I'd say. And like, how did they not solve this problem until like Breath of the Wild, basically? Like, they just always had these annoying... Because like, Navi's a fascinating thing because... It's a she, is it? Or it or whatever. But she's there to solve a problem that doesn't exist anymore. The problem is Zelda's making this game that's like unlike anything that they've done before. Or
Zelda's making this game.
Zelda
Princess Zelda made this game. This is like her autobiography in N64 cartridge form.
Shut up, okay? It's canon. Zelda made the game. So Nintendo's making this game. It's completely unlike anything they did before. There's these new mechanics like the lock-on, and like even moving around a 3D world is sort of new for some of the players and definitely new for the genre. So they needed a character to hold the player's hand going into this and sort of make sure everyone knows what's happening, everyone understands the mechanics. But they really went overboard with it, and it somehow just got like mixed in the paint of Zelda, and they couldn't extract it from it until Breath of the Wild.
I do think now, just this is simply because like I've played Skyward Sword, and like, sorry to bring it back to this, but compared to Skyward Sword, this game is not as bad. I will stress that, because you know how Navi during this game, she'll say, "Leo, watch out," or something like that. And she'll say something like that, and you can press a button to hear what she has to say, or you can ignore it. But in Skyward Sword, you don't have the option to ignore it. Every single time she's trying to tell you something, she'll pop up, do a really slow explanation, and then disappear again. So while I do remember being annoyed about Navi the first time I played this time around, I went back to play it again, by the way, before, because I was delighted for an excuse to go back to play it. I was that excited. But I wasn't as annoyed this time around, because I felt like it wasn't as intrusive as Skyward Sword. Now, having said that, I do agree with you. It has aged badly.
Yeah. Like, one thing I was going to bring up is, well, first of all, before I like start shitting on anything more than I already have, going back to play it now, and obviously you do have some nostalgic goggles on to a certain extent. We all do when we talk about older games. But what was it like now? The experience, like, does it feel as good? Does it feel as fresh and exciting, or has its age shown itself?
No, it's definitely interesting thing about this now, right? So the first time I properly played, the first time I played Zelda, it was on the N64, but it was only at a friend's house and for a little bit. The first time I properly completed it was on the GameCube in this collector's edition. That was really good. That was also the first time I played Donkey Konga, incidentally. Just want to get that.
You
out
always
there.
always comes back to that. Wow. Year zero is Donkey Konga.
Wow. But I also played the remake on the 3DS, which improves on an awful lot of things on it. But even the GameCube edition, like the fact that you can use the GameCube controller was a huge thing. Like, the worst thing I would say about Zelda is the N64 controller.
Yeah.
I'd say that about any N64 game. Like, what? Like, who looked at the N64 controller and thought, finally, somewhere to put my third hand? Like, what were they thinking?
I know,
you know,
it's fucked.
like it was the first time I've gone back to play an N64 game in a really long time, and I forgot how much I hated the N64 controller. That was the main issue. But while it has aged, I don't think it has aged as badly as a lot of games of that era. I still think it's very playable.
Okay, well, one thing, and it'd be great to hear Sean's thoughts on this as well, where I think it has aged is its looks. Now, we all know
Graphics.
we all know looks aren't everything, but this game's fucking ugly. Like, it is fucking ugly. It is fucking
I can see where this already. I can see this podcast is going to be me trying to say, well, you know,
The evil within
not all
is-
N64 games. like I'm not going to 100% defend it because there are some ugly bits in it. The one thing I'll say to counteract that is the direction in this game is very good.
Like, do you mean in terms of cutscenes and camera placement, etc.?
Yeah, stuff like that. But you are right. Like, fucking Link's nose, man. What the hell is going on there? Like,
But like, I was trying to think because there's games that came out in this era that I still, despite their technical limitations, think look good, mainly because of art direction. So like Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid 1, I still think legitimately look good. Apart from the character sprites in Final Fantasy VII, I don't think anyone is willing to die on that hill.
I've got some kind of nostalgia for that.
But yeah, Zelda. I just like one thing. Like, we're doing a video on pre-rendered graphics at the moment. That'll be out either before or after this podcast sometime. Don't worry about it, guys. Don't stress. But the pre-rendered sections of Zelda really stick out to me. I don't think it's very well integrated. Now, maybe you could argue that some of those give it like a twisted sort of otherworldly feel that helps with those areas in the game, but like they look so awkward compared to like Hyrule Field looks pretty good. But then you get into the market or near the castle or church or whatever, and it looks pretty static.
The Temple of Time is one of the worst. Like, when I was playing it again, there's a bit just outside the Temple of Time, and it looks really horrible. Like, it looks like a really bad JPEG image, really blurry. And like, now this might be because the TV I'm playing it on, which is much bigger than the previous one, but like, it's not good. It's really not good.
Yeah. What did you think of the look of it, Sean?
I mean, I'm just looking at some footage of it now as well to refresh my memory, and it's not terrible. Like, the one thing I'd say in its defense probably is that there was so much in the game. Like, it was such a huge game. Like, it was the biggest game I think Nintendo had ever worked on at that stage when they brought it out. So they fit so much in it that I guess they had to make cuts to the graphics in some way to accommodate that, really, you know?
Yeah, and I get like, would you describe it as quasi open world, Steve? Or
You almost could, yeah. Like, because I was thinking of that when I was playing it. That, like, I mean, in a weird sort of way, it kind of is. Like, for the time, it's probably one of the like best examples of an open world. Like you said, Hyrule Field is one of the best things about the game because it manages to sell the idea of a really big space, despite the fact it's not that big. Like, it does that really, really well. And again, this comes back to direction, because one thing I noticed with Hyrule Field is almost every time you're in there, if you look, there's some direction you can look in that's kind of like a slope, so you can't quite see everything in the distance. Now, I know a lot of this is obviously down to they can't render the entire field in one go.
Yeah.
But it does a really interesting job of like making it feel like, man, this place is huge. Like, I can't even see over the horizon, which I'm like, yeah, walk for 1 minute, man, you'll see over the horizon.
yeah. True.
But it does a good job of that, though. That's the thing. Like, the main thing about this is, like, yeah, it does have an awful lot of flaws, but it was a trailblazer. It tried so many new things, and like a lot of the stuff it did try, dated and antiquated as it is, it succeeded in a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, can you imagine playing any game now without Z targeting?
Yeah, like that was the huge one, and I think it solved a problem that a lot of 3D games had in terms of like because like when you come from a 2D sphere, no, that's not a good way of putting it, but when you come from a 2D plane, I guess, it's very easy to know, like, you just hit the attack button and it's going to go either left or right, and that's that's the only way to miss, really. But within 3D games, like that was a problem for a lot of games. And it's what I really like about Zelda is that it used Navi to sort of personify or anthropomorphize the concept of it. Similar to the way that Lakitu in Super Mario is the cameraman. So like controlling the camera was a new mechanic, as mad as that seems. So they wanted to give it to a character so players could understand it better. Which sort of like goes hand in hand with the Navi being an annoying thing, but like it's sort of like a very Nintendo way of introducing a new mechanic.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you brought up that now, actually, because I was just thinking, like, Nintendo has this weird habit around the N64 stage where they try to contextualize all the features in their, like, games. Like, there's a bit in Legend of Zelda as well where you can get a secret item. I think it's called, like, the Rumble Pack of Mystery or something like that. But, like, basically, every time, like, if you have this stone, the stone vibrates around secrets. And it was a way to explain why the controller vibrated, like, at certain points. It was like... Dude, and I also remember being really disappointed every time I got it in the game because, like, well, I haven't got a rumble pack for this. So.
But, like, did they expect people to be like, oh, this new mechanic doesn't have a character tied to it, so my brain can't process it. Rumbling, I'm going to throw away my controller. It must be defective.
Sure. Who knows? But listen, I mean, you're shitting all over it now, but you guys haven't really played it, so I'm going to, like, go on the offensive
Sell it
here
to
now.
us. Yeah.
Right? The one thing for me, I'm going to like throw my trump card from the very start because that's how poker works. The one thing I'll say in its favor, right, what really got me and made me want to play it again was Ocarina of Time and a lot of Zelda games, unlike most other games like this, is such an earnest game. Like it plays it very straight, which I really, really like. Like almost any other game like this, you're going to have a moment where the main character says, okay, we need to appease the audience, grab their attention. Let's have them break the fourth wall and say, like, oh, if this was a video game, I could do this. There's none of that in Zelda. It plays it like Lord of the Rings style, like straight and just, okay, this is a serious adventure. It's the only reason I think they can get away with the fact when you go to fight Ganon at the very end, the guy is playing a fucking pipe organ at the end. You could not get away with that in any other game because they'd be like, well, I'm doing this because I'm the evil guy, but he's doing it in complete seriousness, playing Ganon's theme song from Link to the Past. And I'm like, oh man, and it plays it straight. That's the thing. It plays it so straight and it's so earnest. Like
that's pretty cool. That like it takes it seriously as well, because this is sort of like a tipping point for games into like these huge cinematic adventures that are rivaling an experience you can get from like an epic story in another medium. And the fact that it isn't playing it up as like, it obviously has, you know, very colorful graphics and all, but the fact that it takes it seriously and takes its story seriously is important, because like it is early days for the genre in some ways, especially in the 3D space. So there wasn't the established rule book that they could poke fun at in a way. So they had to establish the rules of this genre, of this type of storytelling, before they could start to like wink at it a bit, which they do in like later Zeldas and other Nintendo games. But it is, that's pretty cool that it, you know, because especially for a lot of kids playing it, they believed in the story of Zelda. And that's one element that I wanted to bring up. Like, I'm not as au fait with the game as you, but one element that seems cool is that it does seem like a massive journey that you go on in the game. And like that's literally a mechanic in some ways, because you use the Temple of Time to grow up in the game. So you literally become like an older version of your character, which is something that Nier Replicant does as well, in a sort of almost like a nod to Zelda in some ways, but it's a lot more of a darker sort of nod that Nier Replicant does it. But I love when a game seems like a journey. It's not like the characters are in the exact same place with the exact same motivations and you're just in the same village or whatever. Like I like, you know, you get from Final Fantasies or anything like that, or like even a Metal Gear Solid, where you're just, there's a beginning and end, but you've been through so much to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, I find a game that I kind of compare it to simply because the characters look kind of alike is Ape Escape, right?
Well,
And yeah, I know, but like, if you just take the tone of those two games and compare them, like, you can see the difference, like, in very stark light. Like Ape Escape, it's like, okay, you got to go to these levels, get your net and catch some monkeys. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it's such a game. Like, and like that's the thing, it feels like a game, and like that, like, obviously there's a lot to be said for like playing a game that just feels like a game, but like when you're really invested, like if you're like a kid playing this, like, and you do want to be feeling really that invested, like you want to be like, oh, I wonder what's around this corner, like, and not think like maybe it's a cool mechanic, or like, no, maybe it's like a secret, in the world. Like yeah.
No, I can see like being a kid playing this back in the day. It would have blown my mind
Yeah.
at stage, And like, well, like when I was doing research for this, I was like, why is it top of the list, And I guess just, even though we're talking about it like being dated and it's a bit clunky in ways and stuff, like for the time, I guess there was nothing really like it. If I'm right in saying that, when it came out, so it was like such a leap, I guess, in the genre, and I guess, well, for being like the first 3D and stuff. So I think like that makes sense. I mean, again, I haven't played it, and I'm not even huge into Zelda games. So like, if I played it now, I probably wouldn't even really be that into it, even though because like you said, it's dated. Like the things that made it great back then, they don't really apply now because there's been so many games that have maybe done things better since then.
it's almost like you have to put yourself into perspective of someone who
Yeah.
would have played it back then. Like sometimes that's what I do when I'm playing an older game or watching an older movie or something. I'm sort of like, okay, this stuff has almost become a cliche now.
Yeah.
But putting myself back then and seeing, like, watching Seven Samurai. Seven Samurai is basically like the Avengers in a way. It's like, get a group of people together, they all row, and then they get together and defeat the bad guys, sort of thing, But if you put yourself back then, you're like, this form of storytelling, this sort of codified, set this, like, established this sort of storytelling norm. And I think Zelda did that with so many different things. And like one thing that goes a little under the radar is how many different like gameplay varieties there are within the game, and how many different
Yeah.
approaches there are, and like all the gadgets and objects you can use. Like there's
There's
so
a
much
fishing
in there.
mini game in this, like, it's,
Yeah.
there's got everything, like,
It's
which
insane.
incidentally I always hated that bit. I hated the fishing part of this game, even back in the day. Like, I just thought it was so pointless.
That's
I remember people loving it.
That's one thing I do like about the Zelda games, is that they, have all these different things you can do, basically,
Side activities and
like
stuff,
the
yeah.
cooking and stuff in
Breath
some of
of
the
the Wild.
later games. Yeah. It just makes the world more immersive.
Is
I
that
guess.
where that got like established, the whole fishing? Because like there's so many. You can do it in Final Fantasy 15. You can do it in the Nier games. You can like loads of
Far
Japanese
Cry.
games. You can do fishing in randomly. Like like there's a monster over there I have to kill, but I'm just gonna get some trout here for a second.
there was the Game Boy game, the Zelda Game Boy game, Link's Awakening, had fishing in it before this one did. But
okay.
I think this is the first 3D one I can think of, because I do remember like when it came out, and like I used to play it, like my neighbors had the N64 and we used to go over and like play it there. And I remember they made a huge song and dance about it. It's like, oh yeah, check this out, go through this door, fishing. It's like, whoa.
This is the future of gaming.
Can you fish
But,
in
you-
Breath of the Wild, actually?
Yes, I presume so. You can do so much shit in Breath.
I don't remember getting to that part, but yeah.
I think you are right, Michael, actually, that you do have to put yourself in the right state of mind, like in terms, because like this is like what this entire side series that we're doing is all about, like comparing a game to to how we feel about it now versus like how it was back in the day. And this is a really, really good example of that, because I don't think any game is going to personify that feeling better than this one. Because at the time, this game was huge, but going back and playing it again now, even though I still think it plays quite well, it's got a lot of good points, it's hard to think of like any aspect of it that isn't done better in a different game. Like one of the only thing, like the main thing that I do think that this still does well and possibly better than almost any other game is just how earnest it is. And it says a lot for a game like this to take itself seriously and not be depressing.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, I think. Like, because you don't get when you hear a game is a serious game, you usually think of, well, Last of Us Part 3, how to kill a puppy, like, you know. But this is like, you know, it's serious, but it's also incredibly uplifting, which very few games I can honestly say are.
Yeah, that's true. Like they generally, outside of gameplay, because gameplay can obviously be exhilarating, but it's not often like holistically the whole experience is like, you know, like you said, uplifting or gives you that sort of boost or something. It either is like sort of flat, or you're getting into like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, which leaves you with this like melancholic, bitter aftertaste, which is great, but obviously that's a flavor that games don't often add in. It's like a weird, because like power fantasy is a huge part of games, and like I think Zelda can fall into that to a certain extent, but not this sort of, you know, it's almost like a Land Before
Time.
Not Land Before Time. I was thinking Never Ending Story or something like that. You know, one of those.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good comparison though. Yeah.
Like an earnest, in some ways silly, but like takes itself seriously, fantasy adventure. Which, like, I'm sure Zelda was somewhat influenced by like those 80s fantasy films as well.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I think a big part of it is like just the world building here is really rock solid. Like, say what you want about graphics, dated mechanics, but the world building is really, really spot on. Like, they do some really clever things, like in so many places, just to get you to engage with the story. One thing I really liked when I was playing this time around, and I never really copped it the first time, is there's a village you can go to, Kakariko Village, and one of the very first things, like you'll kind of walk around and explore, and one of the first things you'll see is this lady who, if you talk to her, says, "I've lost all my chickens. Can you find all my chickens for me?" And it's an ingenious way to get you to explore the village.
Yeah.
Like, it's a mini game, and you know you'll get something for it. So he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, this probably won't take long. I'll do that." And as a result, you kind of end up exploring the entire village, like just as a way to kind of get something else. Like little things like that. The design in it is really spot on, which again, that's Nintendo doing Nintendo.
Yeah, like their games seem to have that sort of level of, okay, we want, like, there's very few Nintendo games that have like some underappreciated or of their classics, underappreciated mechanic or something like that like just didn't work. They always like explore these things really well. And like, I guess that extends to like the combat in Zelda, in Ocarina of Time, I think is probably one of the best mechanics in it from what I've seen and what I've played. Like the targeting system for its first go is pretty solid.
Yeah. I wouldn't say there's like, I don't think that's aged badly at all.
No,
I think like like, I mean, you could say it's a bit simplistic, but it still functions really, really well. Like, I think the animation overall in this plays a big part as well. Like, especially when you're playing as like Kid Link. Like, I think the animation the work they put into the animation of him really, really helps sell, like, in terms of like, you know, the earnestness and like the idea you're going on an adventure, because little things like I love the way when Kid Link opens a chest, he has to kind of climb into it to pull the thing out.
Yeah.
And like little things like that, like you can get the grown-up the Hylian shield early on, but you can't really use it as a kid. So it's just like a little bit too big for him, and like he can only carry it on his back. So in order to use it, he has to crouch down, kind of like curl up into a ball. And that's the only way he can protect himself if he uses that shield. Even like when you're running, you can hear, like, this is a tiny little thing, but you can hear his sword. Like, this only happens when you're an adult, but you can hear the sword and shield kind of like clanging off each other when he's running.
That's cool.
The tiny little details they put in just to make it feel kind of epic really sell it. Really, really sells it.
They really went all out with it, I guess. During the research, I was reading that it was originally meant to be first person.
No way.
Apparently,
Really?
yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that was going to be a thing.
But when they brought in the whole, you go into the future and stuff and turn into an adult, they realize you're going to need to see the character for that to kind of shine through.
That does make sense, actually. Yeah.
But yeah, that would have been mad if it was the first person. It would have had a totally different
It would have been
feel,
like Kingsfield or something like that, one of those, like, or a Skyrim.
It would have
I
been
guess.
shit.
Yeah, probably wouldn't have been. Because like Link is such a iconic character with his fucking green elf costume and shit like that. So see, and like you're completely right, Sean. That would have taken the impact out of seeing him grow and become adult Link.
It probably would have. It wouldn't be top of the list today.
We wouldn't be talking about it right now.
Yeah.
Do you know, actually, speaking of like the look of him, do you know who Link's like general look and face was inspired by?
Danny DeVito.
Ray Darcy.
What? There's a reference for people from.
There's a preference for the Irish people
of a certain
with
age.
his classic good looks. No, well, this isn't confirmed, but like a lot of people think that he was actually based on Leonardo DiCaprio at the time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, he's blonde, so
he's got the parting in the middle as well, doesn't he?
That 90s fuckboy hairdo, yeah.
And he also has a face, which is about as much detail as you can go into in these games. Like,
that's true.
Streets back, all right. I know. I was just thinking of like boy bands with the middle part and hair.
That's okay. That works. We'll keep that in.
Yeah. Don't edit that out. But but the size of the game, right? Actually, now this is a bit of a stretch, but like in terms of like the size of Hyrule Field and stuff like that, you kind of equate it to like the Irish countryside and going on adventures there. Like,
stop
it's
trying
not
to
like
shoehorn your Irish agenda into this game. Okay,
what are you talking about?
Zelda. Link wears green, so obviously he's a Celtic supporter. I was like, no, sorry, that doesn't work.
They were originally going to give him a hurl instead of a sword, but they decided that'd be too brutal.
Why haven't they done that in any game? A hurl would be a sick weapon in a game.
There is the GAA game.
But that's not... You can't... Well, okay, you can't kill lads with it, I guess, in a certain expect.
Okay, lads, real talk. Which is better, Ocarina of Time or the GAA game?
GAA all the way, man.
GAA, like if you say anything else, you're basically giving up your Irish passport. Hurl would be amazing. And then you can customize it with your own like grip on the handle and put tape on it and stuff like that.
That'd be cool. You could use it for multiple things.
Is this where this podcast is going to go now?
No, sorry.
What multiple things?
You could use it for, attacking. You could use it as a cane if you needed to, like, traverse a mountain. You could use it for killing the fish that you catch. Just whack them over the head.
You could use it to cross a very small river.
There you go, yeah. You could use it for cooking up a big stew, just as a big wooden spoon or something.
Jesus, guys.
See,
let's
look,
get on this. Fucking...
Gotta think about all the possibilities.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Legend of Zelda, Hurl of Time.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Sorry.
Do you just to get back to Ocarina, do you think
do we have to?
It's do you think it's do you think the subsequent Zelda games have improved on its formula?
Yeah, no, I think they have. Like, it's like almost like you were going back to the Citizen Kane kind of reference. Like, it is notable for all the things that like it pioneered and all that. But I think almost every Zelda game, well, not almost all of them, but like a lot of them have improved on them in some way. I think if you combine the best aspects of every Zelda game now to make one Super Zelda game, there's very few aspects of Ocarina of Time I think they would take, because I think like other games have done them better in some way. There are one or two things, but most things have been improved upon.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think it's safe to say that in this case, its legacy and its impact at the time is sort of what means it has this high ranking in like the greatest games of all time. And like I guess that's not to be dismissed either, because like landmarks like this should be celebrated, and it's not like it's just that. Like I don't think, Steve, you'd say that it's not still a fun adventure game.
No, it's still great. That's the thing. Like I said, when we decided to do this, I was like, oh my God, yes, an excuse to go back and play Ocarina of Time. I've played it on N64, GameCube, Wii, and like 3DS, which is a testament to like how much I actually love the game. I know it sounds like I don't, because I am pointing out its flaws, but that's just because they're there and it's easy to see. But I do still really think it's a good game.
I,
And it. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just I was gonna say I was wondering when I saw it on top of the list as well, like and it's obviously got a 99 score, like how like when roughly were all those reviews, like how is it the top on Metacritic? But it's the N64 version that's at the top, so
Yeah.
it would mean that it's just reviews for that platform.
It was incredibly critically acclaimed at the time.
Yeah.
Like I think
Yeah.
I think it's almost the closest example we have in video games to an instant classic. Like there's lots of games like that have an impact and you're like, okay, this is going to be talked about for years. But I remember back then, like I didn't have an N64, but I still was aware of Ocarina of Time and the impact it had.
Yeah. It was a literal game changer, like.
Yeah, and like it sold a lot as well. Like it and Mario 64 are probably the main reasons that the N64 succeeded in any way as a console as well.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that pre-orders for Ocarina of Time in America were 3 times more than they'd been for any other game ever up to that point. Like insane numbers.
Mental.
Like.
I was just going to say it's also a really good example of a game transitioning well to 3D when a lot of games didn't. And I guess both Mario 64 and this are games that did that extremely well when a lot of classic games around that time did this, as in like you got your Metal Gear Solid, a lot of people forget, was a 2D game originally, so it was transitioning into that space, and like some franchises ended around this time. Like Mega Man could never make the transition over to 3D. Castlevania less so, and it tried to do it years later, but it never really worked out. But Zelda did, and I guess that's a reason, because like there were successful games, like A Link to a Past was a huge game, but before Ocarina there were huge games, so it was quite anticipated, and it for all the hype it seems to have delivered on what it was promising as well.
Just another numbers fact. I
Mr.
read
Wikipedia over here.
Yeah, Mr. Wikipedia. Yeah, sure. I read that it sold 2.5 million copies in '98, even though it only got released 39 days before the end of the year.
Holy shit!
Which is
That's
crazy.
insane.
Yeah,
Shit.
that's worldwide, I believe, but still, that's incredible for that time. You know.
It's very funny because like I know a lot of people seem to think that the main reason that it's like on the top of all these lists and so critically acclaimed is because of all the innovations it did in terms of technology. But when I was thinking back on it myself, the thing that really grabbed me and the thing that made it a game worth playing was like the storytelling and the world. Like it wasn't the technological bits are usually baked in, so like if you don't notice them, that's good. It means they're doing their job.
Yes,
you know. So so I didn't really think about it that much, but I did find myself coming back to different aspects of like the way they present the world, like how things are shot. I still think the direction of this is really good. There's this really good scene in the game where you have to sneak into Hyrule Castle to meet Princess Zelda for the first time. And the scene itself is kind of nothing. Like, I know anybody listening to this is immediately going to say, what? But hear me out. Like, it's a big exposition dump, right?
Yeah.
So she tells you a whole bunch of stuff that you need to know to progress the story, but nothing happens other than that. But it's a scene that a lot of people remember really fondly. And I can see why looking back on it, because the way it's shot is like a really good piece of like dialogue in a movie. Like the camera moves around in interesting ways. It focuses on things in the background if it wants you to like be thinking of something else. Like there's a bit where she's talking about like, you know, the fate of Hyrule is at stake here, and it focuses like a lot on like these flowers in the background instead of the actual conversation, which is really smart. And it breaks it up a little bit because they have a bit where you have to look through the window to see Ganondorf for the first time. Just little things like that. It's really well directed, like in these little moments.
Sorry, that's crazy, Steve. Because as you were saying that, I'm watching gameplay of it at the moment. As you said, the flowers bit, that it's on that scene.
Oh my god, no way.
I'm watching a full gameplay and it just happened to be at that scene. That's crazy.
It's meant to be. But that's insane, and I think it speaks to how much they got right for the first time they were doing it. Because like a lot of the guys working on this game weren't used to making 3D games, let alone making 3D cinematics to put in games. And like a lot of times, a game would make the decision, like Final Fantasy VII did, to have those as separate from the rest of the gameplay, as in their FMV sequences, literally made by with different equipment in a lot of cases. But in Zelda, it's all baked in. It's all part of the same engine. So that gives a consistency to the visual language of the game, and B, allows them to have a lot more cutscenes in the game because they don't take up as much like actual space in the cartridge. But like it's amazing that they got so much right, and that they established so many things that have kept going forward for things they were doing for the very first time. Like it's one of those perfect storm sort of games where everything just happened and coalesced at the correct time.
I honestly think that the reason people love the N64, a console which I think everybody has rose-tinted spectacles with that, because it is a problematic console in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I've talked about my feelings on the controller, but like it's amazing. Like more than anything, Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, that 1-2 punch, like that alone could have sold the N64, and did for many people. Like it was so good.
I kind of, all this chat now about it, I do actually kind of want to play it just to see what might, because like you were saying earlier, I know you need to put on a hat, like, you know, that, you know, to transport yourself back to the 90s.
A backwards baseball cap.
That's the one, Fred Durst. No, I know you'll be. No, anyway.
That's whack, man. That's whack.
No.
What, Steve? What was
I don't know. That's
that?
whack.
90s impression?
Whack.
I have no idea.
No, but like there's plenty of, like, I'm the biggest fan of games nobody else likes. So there's like
Evil Sin.
Shut up, Steve. No, but like there's plenty of games back in the day on PS1 and PS2 that I loved. That probably now, if you played them for the first time, you'd be like, you know, there's been so many games I've done stuff like this better.
Pandemonium 2, yeah.
I haven't played that, but I played the first one. I loved the first one. I know everyone hates it.
Fair
yeah,
play. That's not going to be on this list.
Don't at me. Right? But yeah. So I think if I did try give it a go, like just even looking at the footage of it now, like it does seem, if you immerse yourself in the story and the adventure, then, and I do love that in a game as well. Even though like I do play mostly like shooter games and stuff nowadays, I do love a good adventure story where you're traveling from point A to point B, kind of. Yeah, so maybe I will give it a go. Can you get it on Switch, boy?
You can't get it on Switch now. I was going to recommend, if you go play the 3DS version, but you probably don't have a 3DS.
No, but I could probably get one cheap enough. But
I do wish they'd actually bring the 3DS version out for the Switch, because that version, like, it's really beautiful. They update the visuals on that, like, amazingly. It looks absolutely beautiful in the 3DS version. And they fixed a lot of the general, like, nitpicky things that... one thing I do want to talk about, because we can't go through this entire podcast and not mention the Water Temple, which...
I was sort of skirting around it in a way, but it seems,
It's something that has to be brought up. And it's funny, right? Because I remember when I first came here to Japan, I played the 3DS version, and I was like, it's kind of annoying still, but it's fine. But then when I went back to this, like on the N64 one again, I was like, I've done this enough times now. This shouldn't take too long. I'll get through the Water Temple and it'll be fine. I spent about 2.5 hours in that fucking temple. It's irritating because... So there's two reasons why this temple isn't irritating, and it's something that the game gets wrong. So for anyone who talks about how much they love this game, here are two key examples of what the game gets wrong. First of all, the item that you need to use more than any other item in that dungeon is the iron boots, which you have to navigate at least 2 menus to equip. Yeah. And you have to equip them like once nearly every 10 seconds. So like if you spend about, let's say, being generous, an hour in the Water Temple, I guarantee you about half of that time is being spent in menus, which is horrible. The other issue with that is that, like, so the main thing with the Water Temple is there's 3 levels, and you can raise or lower the water to be like at those levels. And that probably doesn't sound too bad, but the thing you have to bear in mind is you can't actually lower it. You can only raise it to the top and then bring it down to the bottom. And why that is annoying is if you have to get something like on the second level and you accidentally raise it too high to the top level, you have to go all the way to the bottom, switch it to the bottom, go to the second level, switch it to the second level, and then do that. And it's not a case of just like pressing a button and you're moving the thing. You have to move to a specific room, one in each on each level to get the water to that level. And it's just insanely frustrating.
We need to set up a counseling group for water temple trauma because
I'm fine now. I'm fine. The gurgling only comes at night. It's fine.
But yeah, no, I think that's always been like, I think one of the reasons the water temple is so infamous, and like people who've never played Ocarina of Time are aware of the water temple and how like annoying and frustrating it is. But I think it almost in a way speaks to how good the rest of the game is, that it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not like every temple was annoying and it was just like a flawed game. It was just like they nailed it most of the time, but with this one area, this one dungeon, they sort of went too far.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because when I was playing it, one thing I noticed is the dungeon immediately after that is one of the best dungeons in the game. And I'm not sure if that's because it's contrasted so heavily with the one before. I think I read somewhere that each dungeon kind of focuses on one aspect of like the gameplay. And that would make sense because the Water Temple is very heavy on puzzles, whereas the next one, the Shadow Temple, is almost like based entirely on combat. Like it's a really, really straightforward dungeon. And there's one really long bit where you're on this like floating pirate ship and you just have to fight a ton of enemies. And that makes up a huge portion of that dungeon. So, yeah. Most of the other puzzles, to be fair, aren't that bad.
Well, then I guess Water Temple aside, we should zone in on what the main question of what we're talking about here is. Does the Ocarina of Time deserve its place at the top of the tree, number one game of all time, according to Metacritic? Steve, what do you think? You're the one who knows most about this game. What do you think?
See, this is it's so tricky. This is the main question we're asking, like, because it is a case of, does it stand up now versus did it stand up then? And I think back then people, they just weren't aware of the potential of video games, and that was kind of like the first eye-opening of the first glimpse of what could be, and people immediately said 10 out of 10, 100%. So like no, like I do think it deserves to be rated really highly. Like I do think like it should be somewhere in the top 100 for sure. But number one, no. I love the game to bits. I really, really do. But like, I wouldn't put this at number one. Now, would I feel differently in the 90s? Probably, but now, no.
Yeah, it's such a thing, almost like exclusive to video games, in that like these huge landmark games can so often be surpassed and left behind by like even just their sequels. There's like so many elements in this and Mario 64 and other games that like just get surpassed in a way. There's certain series that like Final Fantasy, for example, since they changed the story and setting and elements with each one, every game has its own identity to a certain extent, so it can survive being surpassed in other ways by its sequels. But since Legend of Zelda, especially, for so many years, its sequels stuck to the Ocarina of Time formula, and improved and iterated it. It took the sheen off it to a certain extent. So it's a difficult thing. Like personally, I think as a landmark title, there's probably no other game that you can put on the top of the tree. There's other games
Very
that like
few
codified, like you could go back to Pong, you could go back to other genres first, Street Fighter 2, Mario 64, even to like first person shooters, like you could put Doom, you could put like COD Modern Warfare if you wanted to go a few years further. But Zelda just set, it's hard to know where 3D games would have went if Zelda Ocarina of Time didn't happen.
Yeah,
in terms of innovation, it's amazing. It's an absolutely astonishing game. The stuff that it does, like, I'm not sure if I'm right in this now, but like, I think this was if not but one of the first games to have like a day and night cycle as well. Like a really realistic one, not just one where like a text screen comes up and says, "It's night now."
Like Castlevania 2 or something does that. It's sort of like, it's night. Get used
Yeah,
to it.
yeah. But like they did this in a pretty the thing is they didn't implement it that great. I remember one thing that pissed me off so much when I was playing this again is the main town, Castletown, the drawbridge gets risen so you can't get into the town when it's nighttime, and that gets really annoying. But they do counteract this with you can learn a song that basically switches it from day to night, night to day. So, you know, they kind of like they covered a lot of their bases and stuff. Everything they kind of messed up, they had something that kind of saved it a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's fair. What about you, Sean? Do you think it deserves its place at the top?
I guess it's kind of hard to say for like the reasons you guys mentioned, but also why is it still there? You know, because it can be dethroned at any time, really. It just takes another game to surpass it in reviews. And if most of those reviews, well, all those reviews are for the N64, which means the majority of them were from back in the day, then, you know, any game has a chance of surpassing it. So, you know, I guess there just hasn't been maybe as groundbreaking a game as that since then. Like
I guess groundbreaking, but also one that nailed the landing as well as this one did with because like it works holistically. If you ignore all the innovations, it works as a game by itself pretty much. Like apart from some of the things Steve mentioned, like I think most players would say it's still a great experience to play from start to end, and that's probably the secret, because there's some games that innovated in certain ways, but like as an experience overall, maybe they're not as fun in some ways. But this one seems to have both.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah.
Maybe that justifies it being at the top. Maybe that's good enough, you know?
It could be actually, because like a lot, like you said, like a lot of games are innovative, but few are both as innovative as this and still enjoyable. Like, so I might take back my answer. Maybe say it does belong on the top. Like, it is a really good game.
It wouldn't be our podcast if we didn't give you an inconclusive answer, guys. So.
Yeah.
So that concludes our first podcast. Yes, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, innovative, could use a couple of hurls, would recommend.
Apart from the water temple, yeah.
Apart from the water temple, which is a big steaming pile of rupees.
But before we go, just the last thing we'll say, Sean, could you give our listeners a sneak peek at what's going to be on the next episode?
I can indeed. Well, do you want me to reveal what it is, basically?
Yeah, do the drum roll, please.
So the next episode, we will be taking a look at Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming, guys. Straight after Ocarina of Time, what comes next?
You could just have looked up the Metacritic.
Spoilers.
But yeah, so
do you know what Ocarina of Time could have done with a skateboard minigame?
Yeah, I think so. And like a pop punk soundtrack.
Sick.
So yeah, we'll be taking it in a very different direction, but lots to talk about with that game as well.
All right, sick. Lads, thanks very much for talking. Talking to me about this game. It was tons of crack as always. And everyone, thanks very much for listening. You can listen to our thoughts on a whole variety of different themes and items and so forth on the Cardboard Box the Cardboard Box podcast and the Cardboard Box item, which is a YouTube channel that we have. And we make new content periodically.
Biannually.
So yeah, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Cheers. Bye-bye.